everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Atlantic CIL podcast. I am here with my new friend, who we met a couple months ago, debra.freed. We're going to be partnering up about transition services here at the Atlantic CIL, starting a support group and workshops for parents and students transitioning to whatever their next phase of student life is. Debra does awesome work. I can't wait for her to tell you about it. Hi, Debra. How are you today?
Thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm really, really excited to partner with you and work with you and talk with you. And I think it's going to be amazing.
Yeah, I'm very excited. So let's start. I always like to start people with their origin story, like it's a superhero comic book. So how did you get involved in transition services? How did you get involved in this world?
So I got involved in this world and I love being in the world, but I got involved in this world because I have an older daughter who will be 26 on Christmas, who is developmentally and intellectually and medically complex and disabled. So we've been through, as a mom, being a parent and having a family, going through all the trials and tribulations of, navigating the world of what things are, what's out there for children or loved ones, or, for disabilities and for caretakers. It's really hard to navigate these waters as your child keeps growing and aging and going through school, and then all of a sudden one day you wake up one morning and that diploma has been taken and the doors are shut and you're left standing on the street all alone going, oh my God, now what do we do? So that's really how I got involved, because it's really challenging to really try and figure out what to do for your loved one and balance a family at the same time.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like from my experience, a lot of schools can do a pretty good job with giving students with disabilities the support they need in the school. But I would always say the most neglected part, because nobody really wants to think about it, is the transition part.
Right.
Like what happens after. So what was that like when your daughter was graduating, and did you feel prepared to go out into this world where you had to find your own services essentially, because all the services that the school provides goes away?
Right. I don't feel that I was prepared. I was prepared while my child was in school, thinking because she has all the staff members and case managers and social workers and programs and, work that they try and introduce you to teach you vocational skills and life skills. And then once all those things disappear and, everyone's giving you congratulations and high fives, yeah, we did it. And you walk out those doors, it is scary. It's devastating trying to figure out what you need to do, because all those hours you had while your child was in school. So there a group I can go to. Then, then I'm going to go to my other daughter's soccer game and my son's baseball game, but all of a sudden those 6 hours a day that I had to do all that kind of disappears. So now you're a 24-hour, again, caretaker. So I felt that the most challenging part was, how do you prepare, not so much the transition part, but how do you prepare for a transition that's going to get you wonderful services, because the state has a lot to offer. The problem is just trying to prepare, and there's a lot of paperwork involved in that to learn how to prepare and acquire those amazing services. And that's what I really, really, really do and emphasize on, because once you do that, the whole new world opens up for you.
Right. That's a great point, and it's a good point to touch on. New Jersey, in comparison to other states, does have pretty strong services. I mean, that doesn't mean it's perfect or there aren't gaps, because there certainly are. But I always tell people this is important to note, because a lot of these services are through Medicaid that we're going to talk about. And Medicaid differs from state to state because of the federal and state program. So whenever people tell me they're going to move, and if you're listening to this out of state and saying, well, do we have those services? Be sure you check your state, because some states are different. Some states are less generous. So make sure
Right.
when you're thinking about moving, you look into what their Medicaid programs are like. And go ahead.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but just to table on what you're saying, to look in, if you are listening from another state, to look in, like Donald had mentioned, with those services. But the one thing that, is the same in every state is really start getting either a state ID or a voter registration card or things like that, because those stays the same for every state, because
Right.
without having proof of residency, no matter where you live, you can't move forward anyway.
Right. That's a great point, Deborah, and we'll start with that too. Like the first thing I think you gotta do when you're thinking about transition is get those basics in order. Like, even if you're a person, like I don't drive because I have cerebral palsy, I still have a state ID. I still got a state ID. Like getting those things in order, making sure you have the birth certificate and all those little things that sometimes we don't think about, the social security thing, all those little things that make it easier to access certain programs. Those are the stuff that I think you can really initially start working on, getting your paperwork and documentation in order while the student is in school. Would you agree that you should kind of start there?
Oh, listen, absolutely. I think, the main thing, like as you mentioned, social security, birth certificate, getting a state ID or voter registration card. Those are the main things. And another huge thing that you can do is you can start accumulating paperwork. That is the most important thing, is to get all the documentation from the first time that you're ever diagnosed or your loved one's ever diagnosed with a disability, and keep all those office visit summaries, because as time goes on, that's what the states, you got to bombard these state agencies or federal agencies with paperwork. And the more that you have, from psychological evaluations to doctor's office visits to IEP plans from the schools, that's the most important. Start creating that folder as early as you can.
I love that point. My mom would be cheering you along right now if she was here, because that's what she was good at doing for me. And like at first I remember being young, I'm like, why do you have all this paperwork? But then as I got older and I ended up going to law school, and I needed accommodations for my law school entrance exams. And at that point, sometimes getting accommodations for the law school entrance exams were tough. But my mom flooded them with anything that said from the state, from my school, that said I had a disability going back since I started receiving services. So like you said, you just get to a point where it's so overwhelming that the person or the agency you're dealing with, like, what can they say? Any piece of paper, especially official piece of paper or IEP thing, you get all that stuff, because anything that indicates we have said this person has a disability and needs accommodations is helpful. So,
oh, absolutely. And it's challenging, because you don't know who's sitting behind the desks of these government, agencies and state agencies, because they've never met us. They've never met,
no.
your family. They've never met the person who's applying for all these, services. And they sit there, and they read the paperwork. And I don't know if it's like, do they flip a coin and decide, do they approve somebody or not? Or, what they do, because it's so random that you don't realize, even when you're applying for Social Security, you're like, here's everything. Like I threw a whole book at you, like 3 books at you, and you're like, oh, but you still forgot to tell me, what your grade was in middle school. Like, when you were 5, or,
right.
You're like, seriously, that matters, but you don't know.
Right. I think one of the things I like to tell my consumers and the people we help is like, there is a strategy to this thing, because, you have to get services. You have to a lot of times justify why you need the services. And as I always say, like, Deborah and I didn't make the rules. So when people complain to me about them, I'm always like, well, that's not the world I would design, but you got to accept the world as it
Right.
is. Well, we're trying to make the world better at the same time. So you gotta play the game a little bit. You want this paperwork? Fine, you're getting 3 folders of paperwork, because that'll leave no doubt, and also give you, whoever's reviewing this, comfortable going to your boss, whoever that is, that you have the documentation if they ask,
Right.
why to justify giving Donald an accommodation. So, you just gotta think like that. And I'm not saying it's fair or it's right or it's the way it should be, because like that's another podcast episode. I could talk
Oh,
about
absolutely.
that.
And it's
Go ahead.
no, you're right. It is. It's just things constantly evolve and things constantly are changing, and you have to go with it. And and it is constant. And the other thing, you're saying, once you go through all of this and you finally apply, and you might get approved for one type of service through one agency, and then maybe your case manager, the intake person who's doing the evaluation, might not be a great fit for you. I just don't want people to. I've had some clients where they're ready to stop or give up or quit and try for something else. And it's really really easy to do that once you get frustrated with one particular service, but somewhere in their agency is someone that you are going to click with, and you just have to keep going and keep trying and keep applying, because there are so many wonderful services. And my daughter is 25, going to be 26, and and she's living right now a lot of these individuals' future. Like, she has a 2-bedroom apartment, and aides and companions and jobs and job coaches and music, of course, therapy and horseback riding therapy and Uber and Lyft. I mean, so it's possible. These services are there and they're wonderful. We just have to cut through a lot of red tape and, connect a lot of dots, to get the picture, or the picture. But it is all definitely possible to do that. It's just every piece of paperwork, like I did, and it's challenging, but it's possible.
It is possible. I think the people who are most successful in getting the services are really going to kind of embrace the process. And like you said, if you're, not getting along with somebody at a certain agency, maybe ask for somebody else, but continue to be reasonable and give them documentation and document that you have given them documentation, because sometimes people can get so stuck in that part of it. Like this person didn't call me back, or the unfairness of it, all of which is true. And I would recommend documenting, but you're only hurting yourself if you just kind of give up. And that's where agencies like the Atlantic CIL and Deborah can talk about what you're doing. So talk about the services your daughter gets now, and what does she get them through DDD? How does it all work?
So right now, the majority, pretty much, our services are coming from the Department of Developmental Disability. But as we know, it's a long, tedious road to get there, and they want you to make sure, you give them everything possible. But, and the really important thing is just to let everybody know is it's really important to be prepared to apply for all of these wonderful state services. But then once you have, and you realize they deem you eligible, and they put you through the process of an assessment to determine what your budget's going to be from DDD, that's another step that's got to be, looked at carefully, because the way you answer some of these questions they ask you, through this assessment, and how you answer them is going to help determine what your budget may be. So that's another area. And my daughter has a very vast budget, because she is truly needs help, with showering and eating and doing laundry and getting dressed and working zippers and tying shoes. And so she has 24-hour staffing at her apartment to help her, which is wonderful, because she's never alone and she always has somebody there. She has a wonderful 2-bedroom apartment. She has a great little roommate, and they get along great. And she has a job through DDD that we found her, in a job coach, that sits with her for a couple hours a day when she's working. She only works a couple days a week. But the other great things are the therapy is music therapy. They bought her a guitar and a stand and a tuner, and she has lessons now playing guitar. And she has, the therapy, horseback riding, and a companion that brings her out 3 days a week. And they go to movies, and teachers, they go out to eat, and they go over billing, how you leave your tip, how to pay for food, so that's always good. Maybe how to order, what should come first, an appetizer, a salad, or maybe what a meal, and maybe dessert will come next, just the order of things. Because, sometimes she goes right to dessert, and you'd have to teach her that you need to eat something good before you can have something bad, so these are all the types of services that she has. And, but it all is a process, to really get everything, that's out there. And it's got to be really, like you said, it's patience, never give up, keep filling out the paperwork, keep throwing the book at them and giving them every single solitary piece of document that you have. Because my goal is, I tell a lot of my clients and my families, and any individual I can talk to is, my goal is that I don't have the everlasting potion that I'm going to live forever, and neither does my husband, neither does your family. So, it's like, I want to make sure, well, I can, and I have, the power to do so, and the control that I know that she's growing up and she's going to be in a great place. So when God, something happens, God forbid, to our families, that I know she's where she needs to be. And You can do that. Now is the time to do it, not to wait until you're 70 or 80 and then something happens, and then you're like, oh my God, what are we going to do?
Yeah, that's one of the hardest calls we get at the center, is people that call us and say, they're getting older and they have a person with a disability, their loved one who they're living with, and they just are getting started with that process. They've been ignoring it or not wanting to deal with it, or, it wasn't always even transition, especially years ago. We think it's bad now, but it wasn't even an idea for a lot of people that people with disabilities can have the services like your daughter has, where they're out in the community. It was just like not even on a possibility or on people's radar. You're right, embracing it, as frustrating as it is, like the first step for getting on DDD, if you're eligible for that, is to get on Medicaid, right? And
Right.
that process can begin. Is it 18 or 21 you can start applying for Medicaid? Do you know,
18.
Deb?
It's
18,
18.
that's what I thought. 18. So really looking at that, asking your IEP team about that, like what's that process like? And getting on Medicaid, because I would say Medicaid is the key that unlocks the door to the services. So first you need the key, and
Right.
and then you
Yeah.
can start doing the other thing, applying for DDD, which is a process as well. And then you're right, looking at, because when you get on DDD, they give you a budget, as Deborah really put it very succinctly, based on your needs. And what Deborah's talking about too is you're gonna fill out what your needs are, and you want to include all your needs. Because if you tell them, my daughter, she's good, she doesn't need that much,
Right.
so they'll write that budget up real quick. All right, here's a couple,
Right.
goodbye. So you really want to explain everything, and that's hard for some people because a lot of people don't feel comfortable asking or feel like they're taking something, but you got to explain it because they're only going to help you if they can it's all about what they can justify. So if you don't
Right.
tell it to them, they can't justify giving you the money. So, and that's why bringing it all the way around, that's why Deborah and the CIL have teamed up, because we want to help people navigate this process. We want to help people, support them through this process, because Deborah's got a lot of experience and knowledge doing it, and the strategies and how to get this stuff done. And of course the CIL does as well. So we're going to be hosting, when's our first workshop? Is it September? I want to say it's the 12th. Am I right? Am I right on that? Our first
I'm looking at the calendar right now because I want to make. I think it's.
Yeah, I don't want to give out misinformation on my podcast, so I want to make sure,
No, I believe the first workshop is Wednesday, September 13th at
Oh,
6.
see already, September 13th, everybody, not the 12th, 13th, Wednesday. And what's the time? Let's get the
And I would
time.
actually, I have it right here.
It starts at 6:30. It's on Zoom. You can go to our Facebook at
Yes.
Atlantic Center for Independent Living, where you can register. I'm gonna boost the post so everybody can see it. Please join. The idea is to have a group of people where we can work on these things together. What's your DDD application? Did you even go to Medicaid? I love what Deborah said. Whoa, wait, before you even start applying for Medicaid, do you have a state ID, a voter registration, like all the things
Right.
Medicaid's gonna ask for? Like, you got to really break it down. And I think, Deborah, what I'm looking forward to is you're really good at that, because I think people try and skip steps.
They, yeah.
They go right from DDD. They go right from, and you're like, well, wait, we're not ready for DDD yet because we need that Medicaid.
Right. Wait, the
Anyway,
other thing that the
go
other thing you
ahead.
think about, and when they're in high school is 18 is a magic number in this country, right? You're legally an adult. You can vote, you can move out, we can charge rent,
Yes.
a lot of things that you can do. So the other thing I like to do, especially if you have a loved one who's staying at school till they're 21, because there's a lot of things you can do. Because the goal is really when you turn 21 and you age out of school and you take that diploma, families I've been working with, they go right into DDD services before they take that diploma. Like everything's set up and they have a support coordinator and we're done. And that's really the goal, even for DDD. So there's not any gaps. But another thing that we have to keep in mind is, like I forgot that, you either need a supported decision maker maybe, or a guardian,
Mhm.
or even a power of attorney to help your loved one, because sometimes it's really challenging to answer the questions even on the Medicaid application or the Social Security application or the DDD application, or when you have an assessment done and someone now is asking you or the individual questions and they can't really answer them. But unless that paperwork's done, which can be done at 18 as well,
Exactly.
then a lot of the things get a little chaotic because it's hard to answer questions. We're not really sure what you're answering anyway. And
Right.
then it's hard. Then you got to wait a certain amount of time to retake some of these assessments.
Yes.
So these are the things you don't realize. Like when what if your child or the individual turns 18, on Halloween, you're not thinking about, you're thinking about maybe doing a party or their birthday.
Right.
You're not realizing that, oh my God, I can submit this application for Social Security, for Medicaid, I got to get guardianship power of attorney. It's a school year. These things are not on the forefront
Right.
of a lot of families' minds.
That's a great point. And a lot of this documentation feeds on itself. Like, I was able, my mom was pretty on top of it, and I was able to get Social Security pretty right when school was over, which is good because it's government documentation determining you have a disability. So you can use that for the next thing and the next thing you need. And so, they're all like pieces of documentation that help you out. So, like you said, really thinking about this in a strategic way. And, when a person turns 18, understanding that, we get a lot of, sometimes parents will say to us, well, I am his guardian, but no, you haven't. They're 18 now. So, technically under the law, they're not, you're not. And, there are alternatives to guardianship, which the CIL always promotes this supportive decision making, because a lot of people in the disability community feel like guardianship is overused, and that's for families and their individuals to decide. But what I love about what Deborah's going to do is she's going to explain this all to people, the different things that are out there, and really thinking about kind of what the next step is, because it is possible to have a successful transition, but the earlier you start and the more you start thinking about it, the better it is. Because, like I said, you may think, well, I don't think my kid needs Social Security right now, which maybe they don't, but you should also think, they could always get off Social Security, like I eventually did when I started working. And Social Security could open a lot of doors in terms of opening to other benefits. If you get SSI, you automatically get Medicaid. If you get Medicaid, that opens a lot of doors. So really
Right.
thinking about that, and you got to decide what's right for you. But the more you put off these decisions, the harder it is to make in the
Right.
future. In the future. So I just
Right.
go ahead.
No, you're right though. You're absolutely right. And I've had families even say to me, like, well, should I really apply for Social Security? Like she doesn't really need it. And I was like, well, that's a really excellent point. She may not need it right now because she lives at home and she goes to school, or he goes to school and lives at home, and as a caretaker, we do everything for our loved one that we could possibly do. But that is now the present.
Right.
And I'd like to take a look into the future, like where are you going to be? If not, hopefully you're going to be here when you're 80 and 90 or 70, or maybe God forbid your health starts to decline or something happens, like where they're going to start applying at 50, or 45,
Right. Exactly.
and that's where it comes down to. Like I try, and it's as a parent, and your family, your mom probably feels, it's really, all you do is when you have a child and they're born and you're holding them in your arms, you're like, you count 10 fingers and 10 toes. You're like, oh, everybody prays for healthy children. And I have two other children as well, and who are younger than my older daughter, and everybody has some challenges, but you always, you don't want to. And when we talked about like some of the things that you don't think that you need, or the money you're afraid to take, or you think that maybe someone else might need it more than you do. Or the other kicker is you don't want to admit that your child needs as much as they need,
right,
because of everything that you do for them. So these are the other things to like look at as well, because I didn't want to say that my daughter couldn't dress herself, even though she could put a t-shirt on, like a pair of shorts. But like she can't button her clothes and tie her shoes or do her zipper up anything, and like put matching gloves on when it's wintertime. Like these are the things that she definitely needs assistance with. And it as a parent, it's hard to accept or hard to admit, or even ask for help, because you want to think that your loved one can do anything.
right.
They don't, and that's the other side. So which is why when you're talking, you said, it's starting early is really, really, really a key. So when it comes down to it, to just put that pen to the paper or your fingers to the computer keyboard and start filling the things out, these applications, that it's just, it can be done so swiftly because of all of the path the path that you've come down and everything that you've done is done,
Right.
So that's why the key is to start really early to do all this.
Yeah, exactly. And that doesn't mean if you didn't start early, it's doomed. I'm just saying if you're in that situation where you're like, well, I don't really want to think about it. Start thinking about it. Start incorporating your loved one to the best they can, because it's important that the person who's transitioning be involved in the process the most they can be, because they got to start learning these things. Because as like the big theme of what Deborah's saying is, you won't be there forever. But if you're talking to your loved one like you are going to be there forever, don't be shocked when they haven't really thought about any of this stuff. So learning about, they should learn the best they can what Medicaid is and what Social Security is. And as a person with disability, like, I always knew when people were talking about me. So you think sometimes people think, oh, that person with a disability, they don't care, they're not interested. And everybody's got their degree of what, participating and being involved is. I'm not saying they have to be, making every decision without support, but just being involved in the process. Okay, what do you want to do when school's over? What is your plan? I won't be there forever. Let's start thinking about the services that are out there. Making a person with disability feel part of the process really helps their confidence and really teaches them that they should be the ones in control. At the end of the day, they have to learn this stuff too. So I would encourage that as well. And the more you start early, the better, because when you start later, it's harder to build that expectation, because you've been doing everything for 40 years. Now you want me to figure everything out. It's harder to do instead of starting them early. So don't be afraid of having those conversations and embracing the process, even though it's tough. But like Deborah said, the more you get involved in the process, the better I think it works out for people.
And we know level disabilities are going to, differ, be different from client to client or individual to individual. Some folks can be more involved in
Right.
planning. Some folks can't. And the other thing is sometimes the questions they ask you at school when you're sitting in the meetings is, and I'm sure people who are listening have heard this before, where do you see your daughter or your son in 5 years from now or 3 years from now? What do they want to do when they grow up? Or they have a lot of challenges in life, medically and physically and developmentally and intellectually that, but I guess some of the questions that I do ask my clients, it's not so much it's where they see themselves or what they want to do is what do you like to do? Like, what are your, do you like me? You like my daughter likes music. So at least we know the services just she got is a music therapy, and it's a therapy with music. It's, and DDD bought her a guitar and a tuner and a stand. And now she sits in her room, uses it also like a coping mechanism as well. So, things like that can really help plan. So, when I start saying, I think for the parents, really, we start planning really early and just by collecting paperwork, making it in a file and keeping everything, in order chronologically of appointments and notes and IEP plans. So when that time comes, when they turn 18, you just have to take that file out and just fill everything out and make copies of it and send it in. That's the great part, is that you start collecting it early. Because I have families that say, oh my God, I think it's in a box someplace, like in the garage or the attic, or, then they're like, oh my God, I need that, or like that first letter you get from Social Security, you're like, oh, I needed that letter because I get like mail every day from Social Security or Medicaid or things like that. And you're like, oh my God, this goes on for such a waste of paper. I just get mail all the time, so
but those are great letters, because it's a letter. Break it down simply. That's a letter from the government saying this person has a disability. Like, that's a great letter.
Right.
So to get that first letter, that's awesome, because it spells out real clearly. Like, nobody can that this person has a disability now.
But you got to save the letter because you need the first letter.
Save it. And you're right. It's that thing of like, oh, I'll put this to the side, and it's tough because you're living life and you're doing your thing and you're just trying to get through the day. So, but really taking a moment and saying, I could, because really you don't know what you'll need. So any little bit helps, and saving it, having it, and in easy, as organized as you can be, easily accessible file. If it is in the garage, knowing where it is in the garage, and knowing where the files are is really important. I did like what you said, because I remember sitting in IEP meetings like 14, 15, 16 years old and getting that question of like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? I'm thinking, I just want to go to lunch. Like, I'm just like I'm like, I haven't decided
Right.
my life, my life plan yet. Much like a lot of young people, disability or not, I have no idea. But I did like instead of asking that, asking, what do you like to do? Because it makes it less intimidating and less,
Right.
we got to figure out your life right now in this 20 minutes. Like, what do you enjoy doing? So I would that's one thing I think I'm going to really appreciate about Deborah's group is just keeping it simple, because right away that question, where do you see yourself 5 years, is so intimidating. And so like you feel like if you don't have a good answer that you're doing something
Right.
wrong. But but like what
Right. And they sit there with a pen and they're like, okay, he wants to go to lunch. Like,
yes. What does this mean? What is what does this mean? What is the deeper meaning of it? It's like, no, I'm just, trying
hungry.
to,
He's hungry. He wants to go to
yeah,
lunch.
I'm just trying to figure life out. So, but I think um I really would encourage anybody who's got a loved one transitioning. They don't have to even be a person transitioning from school. They could be, they graduated school and they're looking for a job. What's DVR like? We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about how the CIL can help, because this is, a lot of people don't even know that Centers for Independent Living, they exist in every state, and they're great resource and support centers. Like, you really need to build your network, and I'm sure Deborah agrees, of people who
Sure.
just have knowledge about navigating this world and having support. And, oh, I got that application, how did you handle that? Or do you have a good contact at your DVR office that was helpful to you? Like, learning those networks is really important, and cells are a great place to learn that. So just
Even
really
like your
want people
calendar,
to
like
do
even with Jen doing the activities that I
right.
mean, like that is like amazing. And I wish that, when I was in high school, and for folks out there whose children, like my daughter has a chromosomal abnormality. So she's missing part of her third chromosome. She's one of 11 in the world. So we traveled everywhere for medical help for her. But, she didn't fall under an umbrella of a well-known developmental disability or intellectual disability. So when you heard, walk for autism or walk for or whatever it is, it could be walk for breast cancer, or, whatever it is, a disability that's more populated, that more people have, it's, you feel that you don't belong when you have something that's so rare. So
Right.
we never did some of these walks and things. I was like, well, my daughter doesn't have that, and that was on me, because I should have brought her out just to introduce her to people that has a disability. But I want to, but you don't know where to go. In the schools do the best they can do with what they have. But, all the social workers and child study teams don't have every organization
No.
who's out in a community or in a state that can offer help to families and to individuals. So, and that's awesome, Michael. Like you said, ASIL's in every state, and I think it's wonderful. But everybody needs to know it's in our state. We all need to know. When we grow this network, and so that's why another reason why I'm so happy that we are working together, because there's families whose kids are in 8th grade, 7th grade, kindergarten, 9th grade. I know, like, just because one class ages out, another one is coming in. Like,
Right.
you know,
Exactly.
it doesn't stop. Children today are being born, unfortunately with a disability somewhere, in some country or this country or a state or wherever, like it is, it's these challenges go on, and they'll go on long after us, and it's just, these things need to be known. People need to know about ASIL and me and you and other places and this, because we need to come together. Like, we need our own system here, because we grow and learn from each other. That's what it is.
I totally agree. And a big key about the independent living movement and philosophy, which Centers for Independent Living were born at in the 70s during the civil rights movement, is breaking down those walls. And people with disabilities, of course, every disability has its own different needs. I'm not saying that some disabilities
Sure.
are different, but there's definitely more power in numbers, and more power in us all working together and forming a network. Because you're right, some people with disabilities that are less visible and less well known do get the short end of the stick, because they feel like, well, that's not really about me. Whereas people, I'm just going to put people with cerebral palsy in there. People, I always say, the non-disability community, like, they get cerebral palsy. It's like a physical disability. They see it. that's like, oh, like we get it. Like nobody's ever questioned my disability, but if it's a disability they don't understand, unfortunately, that stigma's still there. So we got to really break down those walls and say, no, everybody's included
Right.
in our activity, and not people without disabilities too, because we want to build that support and build that unity so we can get the more resources we need and the more services we need. So
Right, and it's great with the activities that you do because it brings people, like, you could right into the high schools and be like, oh my God, Tuesday night, there's an activity, we're doing, you know, art class or whatever.
Right.
It is from every school. It's not just one school. It's not just this school. It's not just, well, it could be someone in college, but you know, it's not just a school sponsored event. It's an ACIL sponsored event where anybody from anywhere in Atlantic County who wants to come out, and you could just meet people, you know, and it's nice to have a friend when you're going through something who understands what you're going through as a parent and as an individual with a disability.
Right, building that network and building that support, and like you said, especially when people are young and they have time. So yeah, I'm really excited. People should really join us for our activity. We'll link to it in the podcast. Check it out on Facebook. Deborah's going to do an awesome job. We have very similar philosophies about what people should be working on. This is going to be a great partnership. Would you like anything, Deborah? Would you like to promote anything before we close out?
No, I just want to thank you for having me on. If anybody wants to reach me, they can reach me on my cell at 954-541-7765. It's best one, or debra.freed at adultindependentservices.com.
Yeah, and she's doing awesome work, and we are happy to have her in partnership with the CIL. So thanks everybody for listening. Until next time. Bye.
Thank you for
Bye everyone.